We just had a very interesting interview with a special guest, Stephen Gillen, who is a former organized crime boss and
From the UK.
from the United Kingdom.
Spent a lot of time in the high security prisons in England.
He was what they call a Category A offender who was extremely high risk in jails, and he's a man who made a incredible transformation from his organized crime roots, from being one of the most dangerous and notorious inmates, to now a humanitarian working with youth and people involved with crime. He's an author.
He's got a book called The Monkey Puzzle Tree, which is really intriguing, actually. And so we talked to him about his journey, his experience, and his ideas on what does or doesn't work in the criminal justice system, and what it is he's trying to do to make the world a better place.
He has a foundation coming out, the Stephen Gillen Foundation, working with youth, at-risk families, and it's very interesting because it gives an insight from when he was a young boy from Belfast, transitioning to England in the foster care system, all the way through his unfortunate involvement in crime. And it's an extremely interesting journey which feeds into our discussions about how we deal with people in the criminal justice system. So I think this is a great podcast that we had. We were very, very lucky to have him
Some
and
really
have
great
his insight.
insights.
Yeah, just incredible. So really, we hope you watch and enjoy, and thank you. And thank you to Stephen. Really wonderful interview. We're joined tonight with a very special guest, a man who has made an immense transformative journey from life of organized crime to one of England's most dangerous and notorious inmates, to a humanitarian, working with youth and people involved in the life of crime, with great talent as a motivational speaker, a businessman, and a philanthropist, Mr. Stephen Gillen. Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Joseph. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're also an author.
Yeah.
One of the books we're going to talk about today, The Monkey Puzzle Tree, which is going to factor in our discussion tonight. You're an entrepreneur. You've recently won a philanthropic award for commitment to stopping violence. But most importantly in our minds tonight, for what we're going to talk about, is your humanitarian work and your work with youth. So I want to just start off with one quote from your book, which really struck Diana and I, and it's quite interesting, actually. And the great monkey puzzle tree stood tall and strong and resilient in the light of the fine morning. It was said that they were magical, that they come from a faraway land that no one had ever visited or found, that the gods in their great wisdom knew a place that was in dire need of their magic and their strength, in their courageous ways, so they were brought to us here to help and to watch and to add their magic to the soil of the land. It is said that they can live to be 1,000 years old and still be strong, that they are a beacon of hope wherever they live, and that they can see and hear all people, places, and things. But what is even more extraordinary is their unique way of knowing special people with special gifts like themselves, and at special times and on magical occasions. So I love that, and I just want to ask you a question. Spirituality.
Yeah.
It played an interesting role for you as a young youth in Belfast during a very tumultuous time in the early 70s, and also your time in England when you were 9 years of age, having to live in the foster care system. And I'm curious about, as we just start to talk about things, how maybe spirituality gave you strength to come through what your ordeal was in jail, to look back and reflect on your history as to what brought you there, and become the person you are now. How did this play a role? I'm just curious what strength it gave you.
I think spirituality for me is certainly that unquenchable well, Joseph, that I certainly went to when I was at the lowest of the low, the deepest of the darkest place of humanity. I'm talking about mentally, emotionally, physically, redundant. But this well is always there, this for us. And it's very profound because I can remember, there was times, especially at the start, there was a time I thought, I can't do this, I actually can't go through this. I'll do the Roman thing. I'll fall on my sword. This seems to be an honourable way out. And I was getting there with that, and I couldn't see 12, 13 years ahead of me what I would be like if I would even survive that. So I was really in a terrible place. But then there would be this voice that would say to me, in the worst of times, you have to go through this. And that, I'd speak to, I said, well, what does that mean? But why would I have to go through this living hell? Of course, it doesn't speak like that. This is a very succinct, concise. It doesn't, but, with hindsight, and this is not my voice. We know when there's a more internal voice that speaks in that way, directional way, the spiritual way that's guiding us. So it was that voice, with that resonance, and a few times at the worst times, it would guide me. I mean, I would go on to have further experiences, that were even more profound, but just in a way to let me know that, what you're thinking and what you is right. So, this is a way that you should be going, but it's very subtly done because it's for us to open the book and to reveal what we should be doing, not the other way around, Joseph.
Because in reading, the book, The Monkey Puzzle Tree, that you wrote, and I know there's another book that you've written, which is very interesting, the Injustice, Love, and Honor. But, Diana and I have read this book now, and it's been very interesting. And I saw this theme of some spirituality, which I think resonated with me and gave some strength. And I think what you talk about being in a dark place, and something we want to focus on, certainly from our perspective in this podcast, is about your experience in the criminal justice system. And maybe you can give us a bit of background and then talk a little bit about your experience in the justice system and in the prison system, and then relate that to how you are helping people now and what we can do better, because it has had a profound impact.
Are there things that work and things that don't work, or is it all completely broken? And
you experienced awful stuff.
Do you think that people going to jail, puts them on a continuous path to continue? Because a lot of people say that is like, you can go to jail if say you're wrongfully convicted, you'll come out a convict, because the experience actually does nothing for recidivism, does nothing to reform people. What's your experience with that?
Well, I would say first, just to give some backstory, I went to prison first at 14 years of age, 10 days after my 14th birthday, because I was kind of on such a trail of recidivism even then that they of course put it back so they could give me a short, sharp shock, as it was called then.
At 14 years of age?
14 years of age, 10 days after my 4th. I mean, I have, I have 3 children, I was a child then, right? But that was the start of it. So, but then I went in and out, and I was a real rebel, even then, really, it has to be said. So I responded very badly to that, really. Now looking, it was more a survival mechanism.
In jail?
In jail. But I was seen as disruptive, the one that they couldn't control. So I'd been moved a lot, even as a youth. So
this is a great point. So to give some context to this, at age 9, after you were moved from Belfast when your aunt passed away tragically from cancer, you were put into the foster care system in England, which you talk a lot about, which is really insightful, about how it groomed you almost into criminal activity. Can you talk about that and then translate that to your experience in the prison system?
I mean, it's very, I think a very pivotal point here is, and I really lived that, I was seen as one of the most dangerous prisoners, all over the press. I was a category inmate. I was released a category inmate, the most notorious, the worst of the worst. So we can claim all that because it's true. But when we're going back, and I'm looking at the 9-year-old child.
9-year-old Stephen.
9-year-old Stephen. There's a lot that people can say, oh, are these people bad? Are they mad and all that? For me, I say no, this is not the thing. It's that I had the strength, the intervention, certainly, the timing, the circumstances to find my way back to myself. Because how I started was, it was a religious family. It was in the middle of a war zone.
In Belfast.
In Belfast. I was born in 71. This was really when
you're
it was
so young
there. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you look very young. Great hair.
No, but this was a time of, when it was
great
really
turmoil.
hitting it there,
Yeah.
right? And, I was the child who used to, be in the upstairs bedroom looking at all the other children playing and thinking they're having a great time. I wasn't allowed out because of the trouble outside. So, it was that kind of upbringing. And my formative years were around kind, wonderful people, which is a, important point.
And that's where the monkey tree was, right? Was in that
the monkey puzzle
sort of magical
tree
backyard.
Yeah, it was in the backyard because that's the other point. Because I was so restrained and I wasn't, and they were so worried about the trouble outside the door for obvious reasons. The back garden was the world, right? And that tree. There's some of the stories about the tree. I mean, I didn't know what to think about the tree. I was half scared of it half the time, but it was so memorable. Yeah. It was so memorable to the times, and it translated so much. And I've carried that as well. But that's the point. And, what I ended up with, Joseph, even though I carried the trauma, I carved that burning trail, of recidivism, all the problems, all the terrible things that brung with it. I ended up in a place where I knew that I was actually groomed, molded, built into a person that I was never meant to be in the first place.
So let's break that down for a second, because you raised some interesting issues in all the podcasts that we've watched about you and in reading your book that, really you pinpoint at age 9 when you're yanked out of the supportive environment you had into England, into the foster care system, and you were an anxious young boy, and then into a completely foreign environment where really you're at a loss. You're searching for some group of support, some identity. And unfortunately, you wind up with people who are escaping from these foster homes, who are engaged in criminal activity, and it's almost predisposed. And that was really a crucible of what started you on that path. And that's an interesting insight that you have.
It's very true because, now on the other side of it, one of the things I say in the office is, look, we position ourselves for success.
Right.
Don't be surprised that we get it. Obviously
it depends on which success
we're
you're looking
the
at.
Work and we're focusing what we should be doing to make that happen. But, what happens in these instances, and it doesn't really matter what culture you are or where you come from, when you're shaped and positioned for something else, it's very detrimental to what comes next. I mean, this is a no-brainer, Joseph, really. And this is where a lot of the pivotal problems begin.
And I'm sorry, just one sec. So one of the things you identified, and we'll talk about it a little bit later because we want to go through this in a chronological order, but one of the brilliant things you pinpointed, which you're advocating, you're talking about, is identifying youth or children at risk at an early age and families at risk, and how to nub this in the start before it gets further along. And this is really sort of the area you're looking at, which I think is extremely important.
One of the things that struck me is that it seemed like when you're always in those dark places, including an anecdote about being locked in the boiler room of the foster home, that's when you would turn to the tree, which to me is like, the sense of roots, and you having not really a good sense of roots. And I think that's one of the things too that, I've come across some, I think, really sage comments on what people need, which is you need to feel like a person of worth in a world of meaning. And how you managed to get that sense of worth was minimal what was available to you. And of course it has to come from other people. And so
there's quite a point there you make, because the disempowerment of people is a real catalyst for this. I mean, I certainly felt for many years that it was engineered in a way by what I had to go through and all that stuff, people, places and things that are I was apart from, not a part of. And I really take that now today to see this as one of the the real line in the sand kind of moments of where people cross over into something else. Because of as human beings we have intrinsic needs. We need, yes, we want to be liked, but we need to be loved, useful. This kind of internal drivers. Once these are all scrambled, and then you're into something else immediately. That's for sure. So, if you have a template that's setting you up for something, why would society think they're going to get a different result? So, it's about pulling it back a little bit, and getting because we're very susceptible, Joseph, to so much, human beings.
Well,
that's the simple way of it.
The prison system is essentially dehumanizing.
Yes, and it's look, one of the things that I certainly see about the British judicial system, penal system, and I really went all the way through it from a 14-year-old kid right the way up. I was category
from a youth,
from a the whole bit. As a high risk category inmate, which really is the end of it. So these are prisons within prisons, special units, and all that. There's nothing in there that compels people and gives them the right bridge and opportunities that they have a chance of finding their way back to themselves, or being useful to society, or stepping into their own light. And you make a good point about this being disempowered or feeling worthless. I mean, how can you really work with that? And then you're in a dark place like that. These are not fertile seeds for something better, are they? And another thing that I definitely see, in prisons is a lot of people are misdiagnosed.
Excellent point.
They're thrown in there. I mean, look, let me just say, some people need to be in prison. But these are a small number, and they do. There has to be some kind of way to protect society where they could have also a chance to get, the kind of process that they need, right? But everyone is thrown in there. You've got people in there with mental health issues, and they shouldn't be in there. This muddies the whole thing. And then you have people where maybe they've just made a mistake. They've made a mistake, but they're put into this university of crime.
Yes.
Now they're trapped with there. Now someone who, in many instances could have really been anything that they wanted to be. I mean, we know this. Now they're really limited, and now they're, even bound to a different fate.
Indoctrinated almost into a criminal line.
I watched, because you have a really great YouTube channel that you operate as well, and I was watching one video where you were talking about your reactions to various films and so on.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting moment when you were talking about the Shawshank Redemption, and one of the characters is released from jail, and he can't handle it because he has nothing in the outside world. He's built up an ability to survive inside, but then once he leaves, what's it like to try and reintegrate?
And do you get help with that?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but it's a lot broader than that because I have a real experience of this, so I can draw from many other cases here.
And we can help with that.
Of the same ilk. But, for me, so if you're talking about long-term imprisonment, we say 5 years and over, then you're talking about the institutionalized elements. There's a different way that it's going to affect, people, all right? So for me, in the big sense, for instance, I mean, I have to say it took me a good 3-4 years till that actually struck home. Now, that's a long time. You wouldn't think that. And then, something really strange can happen in the sense that what I realize, and I tell people this is, as human beings, we have to regulate ourselves. So, if you're living on memories, of course you're in a very traumatic place. You think of good things, to regulate yourself, to make you feel better about things so you can survive. But what you find on a really long sentence like that is after 4 years, you suddenly realize, well, I haven't made any notable memories that are healthy. This is a very painful, really strange place to be.
This is a really good point that you raise. And you had, what's so interesting about your story and your insight is from a young boy at age 9 who was an anxious young child to the foster care system that really was horrible for you and frankly for a lot of children in that environment, then going into jail as a youth and then as an adult and then being that category A offender. You had so much pressure on you from a system that didn't want to help but hurt. And I really want your insight on that because we fight against harsher sentences. We think harsher sentences don't work. We need inmate-focused policies, a progressive way to help people. And you have such great insight from such a young age, all the way to really achieving this transformation, which is amazing. So help us with that a little bit, because it's a long journey. And
it is, and there's one of the problems is kind of, as it progresses, this kind of thing with human beings, because of how individual they are, they may need more of a bespoke kind of support system, because this is not even tackled at all.
Not everybody's created equal.
Throw them in there, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And we don't really care. This is one of the problems, and it's just not engineered to help people step into their their full life. There are lots of different drivers for that, and of course there's the people who throw stones, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But if we're looking for something that really helps this problem and makes it better, so therefore that would be more abundant for society, more healthy for society, more healthy for families, and that would that would go out, and there would be, the more energy, healing energy of making things better. Not to mention, everyone would save a ton of money if this is the thing that everyone's, going to shout about.
So you raise an excellent point. So what you're talking about is that, really there's a rarefied amount of offenders who really need jail.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who are either misguided, had mishaps in their life, or have mental health issues, and we need to have a much more humane and progressive way of dealing with them to help them become not offenders, to integrate into society and treat them better and help families. And that's something you're really trying to advocate about, right?
Absolutely, Joseph. I mean, you've just said it there really, really succinctly. But look, I'll give you an instance. There was a charity I was working with in the UK, and there was actually 2 prison officers who had worked years and years and years. They thought, wow, I've seen so much of this, and we can do much better. Now, even the government, in the UK, really started funding them with a lot of money just lately now, because what they was doing was actually really having an impact. And where they was intervening was, they was, especially with the people who was first-time offenders, or that made a mistake, or, they was just starting their kind of journey within the judicial system. They was getting them at the other end, and they was staying with them for 2 years. They was working with a lot of companies, and they was getting them the jobs, but they was giving them the support, but they was actually walking with them for the 2 years to give them a chance.
So it was a tailored approach with
sort themselves out.
Right.
Yeah. And this was really working, because it has to be more sustained.
Right.
You see, what they do is, they hit you with a stick. All right, hit you. You don't then you go back or whatever. I mean, as we know, this is not the best approach. It doesn't work it certainly doesn't bear fruit. But we have the evidence in this model that this is really working. To the point that the government was saying, especially with open prisons, Joseph.
Yeah.
They was really coming in, in their troves, and saying, hey, we've hit something here with this, because the figures are changing. Now the numbers are changing with this. So there's evidence of a better way. That's just one instance.
That's extremely important. So what you're talking about is having a dedicated team working with offenders to go through a 2-year process, or maybe even more if necessary, to help them through the issues that they have and get them integrated into society. We don't do that. And that's very progressive, and you're advocating for that, which is wonderful.
And it's the employment issue as well that we see here, because we have to live. And of course, one of the problems here of reoffending, we have to live. We have to have a purpose as well, Joseph. We have to have a direction where we can see something, a goal, and say, hey, I'm doing this because, I feel good about doing this because, right? So, all these drivers. So, the employment part of it was really, really integral, right? And but the support, because there's teething problems because of the institutional element, it has to be said, and the programming and the trauma that you're bringing as an outlaw or an outcast or disempowered. Again, we're back to the disempowered piece. So this, was opening up a much better thing, and I was really heartened by that. So this is working. That's just one way forward.
So this is a great great point that you're making, that when not all offenders are created equal. So some people will travel through life and be groomed for this and wind up in this life of crime. And you had been involved in organized crime and to a certain extent was a boss of crime, but you were groomed for it. You were predestined to it because of your experiences where you didn't have the support network that you needed. And then you were able to achieve this on your own, but other people don't have that ability. And so what you're advocating for is that we need to put more resources into working with these people to give them success, get them employment, get them education, get them mental health services. And that was lacking so much when you were a youth and first indoctrinated into the system.
Look, the
and we have that here
there.
now still.
Yeah, and we have to focus on this because there's other parts of this as well. In a humane, progressive, developing society that needs to keep elevating, where are we really at with this thing? You need to be leading ahead of not where we are now, but where do we need to be and where are we going? Is a better answer
as a society.
As a society, as it's flourishing. And another thing that I would say that's important, right? And this, I'm living proof of this as well. Is that look, human beings are human beings, people are people as well. We know that, right? You set up for whatever, then there's a good chance so and so will happen or will exhibit. But I've met so many talented people. They could have been anything that they wanted
in jail.
They could have picked a vocation, they could have picked something, they could have really flew it at. They could have been, but through that, this is why with the Stephen Gillen Foundation, one of the things that saved my life certainly was entrepreneurship.
Talk to me about the foundation. What do you want to achieve with the Stephen Gillen Foundation? This is really important.
There was three things we really looked at, root causes, Joseph. One was about the family unit. For obvious reasons, because of the dynamics of that.
Very important.
It's absolutely key to get that foundational stuff in a kind of an order, because we know that it would flourish better if we do that. And there are many, many ways and reasons and approaches to, kind of help there with that, obviously. The other thing was kind of coming in to, with the youth, really, with the programming and the issues of, where they glamorize this crime, they think it's good or it's cool or it's tough. I mean, this is nonsense, right? But for children at that, with the role models, that they don't see that. We can't get the messaging in. All right, so another way was to target the messaging there to change that.
How do you get to them?
Well,
Diana has an interesting question. Hang on, hold on for this one. Just like,
when you were a youth and starting down that path, would you have listened to you?
Absolutely not. But going a bit further on that. If someone like me had turned up, wasn't stupid and said, "Wow, this is quite a person. It's quite a presence." People kind
and he lived it.
Takes one to know one. That has a different resonance completely. It interrupts this process, right?
You talked a fair bit about having this burning anger in you when you were younger too, though. Do you think that gets in the way of people actually receiving the message?
That's a really, really good point. For me, it certainly did. But this is why we go back to the foundational stuff of the family.
Right.
Because the answers for that lay there.
You try and get in at the first level where this starts.
Yeah, because this is where, people get unsettled and they and this stuff starts to exhibit, right?
I think anger gets a little bit too harsh of a name too, because anger can actually be useful. You can take that energy and that rage and turn it to something productive like entrepreneurship. Right.
So if you have the right guidance, and you need the right guidance,
it's a double-edged sword, Joseph.
We get angry at the direction of the law sometimes,
you have to be careful with that.
And we use that to channel some sort of positive change. So
when you're
it can be useful.
But you know what you're doing. If you think
you need the guidance.
They haven't matured into that. They don't know how that energy works yet.
Are you finding with the foundation that you've got the right support from government? Because they need to be a partner in this.
We do. It's kind of a game, isn't it? And it's a game of timing and positioning, and layering the work usually. But and it's about the right approach, certainly, to government. But we kind of look to find more momentum in other areas, knowing that will lead there anyway. This seems to work, right? With them guys.
So you're trying to do it at a community level with business involvement.
And we get more of a momentum,
Right.
you know, we can put some lift under that, and
Maybe get a bit
it's
of
more
pressure
of a
on government.
positioning to show what we're doing, to to put some facts behind it, and and stuff like that. This is the best way. But the other thing I'd say about entrepreneurship, and this is it's really, really important, because if it's like a three-pronged kind of solution based thing here, is entrepreneurship. It saved my life, Joseph. It certainly did.
Talk about that a bit.
Well, it really did, and it goes more kind of in depth. So you're saying about this anger that people carry with trauma and all this, is where does this go, this energy? How do we package this in a better way where it's not so detrimental to everything it touches? Mm-hmm. I mean, it took me a long time to get there with this, but the end result
You got there.
was entrepreneurship. And what I love about entrepreneurship in a really simple way is it develops you as a human being. It forges you. And if you can become good at it, then other people benefit. And they get the chance to stand up and do the same thing. To look after their families, to step into their full light, to learn to be taxpayers, to learn to be responsible people who can care for the people underneath them.
And stand on their own.
And stand on their own 2 feet.
And you made
And
an
this is
interesting
very
point, I
important,
think,
of course.
about, when you hire staff, it's a good thing for you and it's a good thing for them, because then they can support their families. And there's an intrinsic wonderful value about that. And that's what you're trying to do through your foundation and through your motivational speaking and everything else about how to build upon this.
And it's the learning. You see, one thing I hold, and it's a beautiful thing as well, but, I like to keep it as simple as possible, really, is for me, one of the things I always say is the learning, to always be open for the learning,
Yes.
And to extend the bandwidth.
Yeah.
That can be tough for some people, right? We know so much, but really, what do you know? You might only know that, right?
It takes us a long time to realize that.
Yeah, and these things, like for me, have been extremely important for me to keep elevating into the person I need to be.
Can I ask you one question, and I'm curious about this, because you've achieved a lot now and have done a lot of great work since your release from prison and going through this transformation. When you look back at the history that you've gone through, it's taught you a lot, has it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And in some way, it's
stuff.
something you might not want to have lived, but it made you who you are now, and how you can contribute now to other people's, to families, to society, and to give back. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's something that may have been extremely difficult and you regret, but it's given you a wealth of knowledge, has it not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing in a way because I've had a heap of problems with that. But it's
a double-edged sword. But
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But it's the migration of a human being. All right,
Your growth.
The thing. Yeah, we're all on a journey here. Let's put it into a perspective. One of the things it's taught me, and it's really revealed this, and I think it's valuable, is look, it's what we become, Joseph, that's really important. Mm-hmm. Not that we're going to fall down here or there on the way through. I'm sure we're going to do that anyway. Hopefully, as less as possible. But it may seem simple to me now, who has done so much internal work and and got so advanced forward into what I should be doing, and I'm privileged to be doing now. But of course, it is possible because I've done it. All right, and if I can do it, other people can do it. It's really the facts of it, Joseph. Anyone can do it.
And what's so compelling is that when you experience time in custody, you experience the harshest of harshest custody, okay? So Category A, I understand what that is. And you had 4 years or 5 years practically in solitary confinement with guards who would provoke you, who would do horrible things and put you through, depths of hell that you could never imagine, right?
Absolutely.
On my show, we can swear, like just f***ing awful. Horrible things, right?
People would have no idea. I should call it the 7 levels of hell.
Right.
I mean, this is beyond what people could imagine. And I have to say, this is the thing, this is another part of it. I see them break people a lot tougher and bigger than me.
Right.
Every day of the week in there.
Right.
Be sure about that. But for me, there was just something in me where I just wouldn't let go of that last part of me. And it was what made me survive. Not saying it was the right way. I would definitely say to do it a different way, but it still got me here. This is the human spirit.
You hung
Joseph,
on
we're
to,
talking
you know,
about here.
you know, in your podcast you said anger drove you, but there was a degree of spirituality with you that kept you going,
Absolutely.
and strength about going forward in life, right?
Absolutely.
And what's so interesting is now when you come out of this, you look back at what that was, and it's a history that has built you to where you are now. And I think it's going forward, not that I should give you any ideas about additional things to do at the foundation, but, I think it's important to educate our society, the public and government, that this is not the way to treat every individual, or even those who we deem to be so dangerous, that we need a better way to deal with people, because offenders are people, and they come from a place where they needed help and they didn't get it. And you have such a wealth of information on that.
Look, I'm a real advocate, like you, Joseph, of this. It warms my heart because, there's a higher mind that needs to be put to these topics and these issues. And a good dash of bravery as well, I may say. But these people are the pioneers of the future. And this is the way that we have to go anyway, as a developing species. So maybe we get there sooner, right? Jump in and start tackling these problems.
Right.
And no, but this is what I would say. I mean, for wise people, for wise people.
And what's great about your approach is this enlightened, progressive approach is that, we have to, as a society, which, we've talked about on our show a number of times, and you're talking about in your podcast. And I think I was watching a very great podcast with you on Second Chance in the UK. That aired, I think, January 2021. And, it's
Raphael Rowe.
Yeah, Raphael. A great podcast.
And of course, he tours prisons all the way around the world now on Netflix.
I got to watch it. I got to watch it. But what's
second
great?
season. There's a lot of.
I'm gonna move away from the food shows that we watch.
Yeah.
Forget Feed Phil. I'm going to go to this one. But what it's about is how we have to have a more progressive way about dealing with people, and you judge a society by how we judge our offenders, and we treat them with civility. And it was such a great element that came out in that podcast with you. And I just think you have so much to contribute that way to how we form policies. And I hope you can go on and contribute as you are now, because it's really wonderful to help us move forward, I think, as a society.
Well, that's so wise what you've just said. You just packaged it right there.
Well, I do have gray hair.
Well, but how we're being judged is not in the best of times, but in the worst of times. The worst of times, right? And how we're working with that. It's just something to really, and I really agree. I mean, I'm certainly open. We keep chipping away at this problem and working with any progressive bodies towards these solutions.
One of the interesting things is, while watching your podcast, some of the really cool episodes, if you put it that way, is because people always they love true crime and all this stuff. You talk about some of the people you got to know in prison, and then you did a review of the film Bronson, because you got to know Charlie Bronson, who's quite well known in the UK.
Charlie, yeah.
And at one point you gave an anecdote of some crazy story that he told you or something like that. But I think, especially if you're in solitary or like high security wings and stuff, you have each other to talk to all the time. And I've heard some amazing stories about the real depth of somebody's persona that the public would never imagine exists there. Did you find, was there some comfort in being able to talk to other inmates, or did you find it was just always aggressive or competitive or?
No, there always is, and this, it's like, there's a bond in adversity, great adversity. Yeah. It's like, if we were soldiers,
like in the trenches.
Trenches in the war, it's all against us, we better band together. But this, we get right down to the human part here that is really important, and I keep going back to that. It's the human spirit. And I think it's important to know, no matter how bad or, wherever we are with that, this can still be shaped for better things, guys, right?
Did you ever?
If we really get down to it. So
and a human element, even with these other people there is a need to get through this and have companionship, right? And that's what we need. We need a better understanding of how to help people feel that support.
Yeah.
Did you ever tell any of the other inmates about the monkey puzzle tree while you were there?
I love that. This quote that you have from the book that we read, I thought it was very a
Because it was
motive.
a source of strength for you. Did
Yeah.
you ever share that with anybody, or was that just your own thing?
In a way, I was too busy surviving.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, you're in a
But-
difficult situation.
Yeah. But going back, I mean, I started my writing journey there, which is part of it, because they would only give us a paper and a pen, and that
And
was
off you
it.
went and you started writing.
Yeah, so this was the start. And again, it's the human spirit. But look, I have to say with you guys, I've got so much admiration for what you do, really. Because you're battling against, something really admirable. And in many ways, it's stacked against you. But for me and the people that are doing that, these are always the true heroes of the piece.
But we not only do we deal with people who are charged, and we work a lot with about wrongful accusations, but we also care for those who are maybe rightfully accused and rightfully in jail, but we want humanity for them. We want to see a way to get to the nub of what happens. And your journey as a child really resonated with me, because a long time ago I had a client who, it still haunts me till today, who went through 21 foster homes. And had there been some stability, some support, some fucking thinking about how to deal with this 9-year-old child, which was the same in my case, he might not have been where he wound up. And we have to do better as a society with better government policies and better intervention to identify children at risk and families at risk and help them when they need it, not when it's too late. And thank God you had the strength to move forward. But not everybody does.
No, 100%.
And you did.
Yeah. You touched on another point, and I'm just going to say it's important. I'll say, I'm not advocating that there shouldn't be a protective apparatus for society.
Of course.
Where people were not saying that, right? But, you went straight to the heart of it again, Joseph, is that, the people who need to be accountable for their actions, they need to pay for, whatever they've been convicted by the courts, that there needs to be a different handling of that. So when the bridge comes on the way out, we can stop the same mad cycle happening. And this has to be, the solution. So just to clarify that, I'm 100% of the same thinking.
And I commend, and I love what your foundation is going to do. And I think when I read what it was going to do and about, trying to identify children at risk and single families at risk, I think you got it right on the nose. And I wish you the best of luck with it. And I think that's the right way to go. And I want to hear more from this in the future from you. And it's been a delight to meet you.
It's a delight to meet you too.
Thank you so much for coming.
Really.
Welcome to cold Toronto.
Yeah, no, I'm having a great time here, by the way. I love the Canadian people. I love the city of Toronto, and we will be back. And
if you have
you'll be
time,
very welcome
go
to
have
it.
some good Italian food on Eglinton. What's that called? 7 Numbers. It's great Italian if you like Italian.
Yeah. And I demand some
Right on.
Italian food. Right. No worries.
Thank you. And
Thank you for having me.
I really highly recommend Stephen Gillen's this book. It's really touching, and it gives a great insight into what it is in his life, but what it would be for anybody traveling through the system of criminal justice and being in jail. The Monkey Puzzle Tree, it's a great read, and thank you so much. It's been a delight.
And you have a website as well,
Thank
Stephen
you so
Gillen.
much. Yeah. And talk about the website and the YouTube channel.
StephenGillen.com.
Yeah, Stephen with a PH, Gillen, EN.com. There's a lot of,
And your YouTube channel under your name as
YouTube
well.
channel.
Yeah,
That's
the
great.
YouTube channel's there as well. That's another medium, where we're trying to get the messaging out there. There's a lot of stuff. Had a lot of press and everything else in the UK. So there's a lot of interesting stories, top level broadcasting platforms on there. Well, there's more content.
Everybody
on the
go to
same.
it. All our viewers,
the
thank
same.
you very much. But please go to this. It's really a great education and a great insight. So it's wonderful. I highly recommend it, please. Thank you very much, guys.
Have a good night.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.